On Fanalysis, we take the analytics used in fantasy football combined with the latest sports betting trends to find the sharpest angles. And for that, we bring in a sports investment analyst from Pickswise, Jared Smith. Jared, it's not too often a 1-4 team is a 10-point favorite, but Indianapolis is a double-digit favorite at home against Houston. Didn't Houston nearly upset the Patriots this last week?
That was a fun game. And I'll be honest, we were talking about it before we hopped on here, the rookie quarterbacks against Bill Belichick and how they haven't had a ton of success. Davis Mills had some success in this game. 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, certainly his best game in his rookie season. And I think that gives me a little bit of confidence, maybe some hopeful enthusiasm that there's some improvement there. And maybe the sports books who have been very down on Davis Mills, maybe they're undervaluing him just a little bit. On the other side of the coin, for Indianapolis, we all saw what happened on Monday night. Very difficult loss. Now you have a short week, and they are very banged up. Their top 2 corners missed Wednesday's practice. Sendejo, Rhodes, 2 very key members of the secondary in concussion protocol. So you have a Davis Mills-led offense that looked a little better last week now against the Colts defense that's pretty banged up. And you said it, 10 points is a lot to lay. Can Carson Wentz stay consistent? He looked great last week against Baltimore. Can he be consistent and play that well for a second week in a row? I would borderline lean no. And if they're undervaluing Davis Mills, maybe overvaluing the Colts a little bit, we have a nice little sweet spot to grab 10 points with the Texans.
Yeah, you're right. A 400-yard passing game from Wentz this past week. But, you know, Speaking of the betting trends, despite being one of the worst teams, Houston has actually covered 3 of the 5 weeks this year. And that has to play at least some role in the value you give to the Texans here.
100%. This point spread is the great equalizer, and that's why when we get to this Cowboys game in a little bit, you'll be able to see a little bit of the discrepancy there, because it's very rare that a team is 0-5, 5-0, 1-4, volatile result to one side straight up, and then they're against the spread record is the opposite, meaning they're above 500 in that mark. That tells me that the market is right with Houston, and the sportsbook operators doing a good job pricing them. And again, if I'm seeing just a hair of value with Davis Mills, maybe that's the undervalue for the Texans. That's where we find a little bit of equity in this line to go on Houston.
You mentioned the Cowboys. We'll get to your Cowboys thoughts here in just a few minutes, but just hold that thought, because this is a battle of teams enduring bad losses. The Bengals, 3-point favorites against the Lions. Both teams had to feel like they should have won last week.
I'm a little bit worried about the Lions' psyche. I know everybody is very excited about Detroit, and for good reason. But there's no moral victories in the NFL. And there's a lot of good karma flowing in the Lions' direction. Everyone wants Dan Campbell to win a game, but that's not going to get his team across the finish line. Emotion doesn't win games in the NFL. Numbers do. Statistics do. The statistics tell me the Lions are a really bad football team. They're bottom of the barrel in DVOA, net yards per play, all of those analytical numbers we take very seriously. Detroit's one of the worst teams in the league. Meanwhile, Cincinnati's a top 10 team. And say what you want about the crazy field goal fest that we saw Sunday against the Packers. The Bengals could have won that game. They maybe should have won that game. Probably a coin flip. If you play that game 100 times, I would say Cincinnati probably wins 50. Green Bay probably wins 50. And now you're giving me that Cincinnati team, which I think you're getting them at a slight discount at 3, because all the good fortune, the good favor, the goodwill that's flowing in the Lions' direction doesn't count to me. The point spread, that doesn't equate there. So I think Cincinnati, with this really good offense going up against the bad line secondary with Chase and Burrow and Higgins and all those guys, to me, that is a bad situation for the Lions. So we're going to lay it here with Cincy on the road.
What's amazing is in the past 3 games, the Lions have given up 19 points, 24 points, 19 points. They're not giving up a ton of scoring. But here, just to follow what you said about why statistics are important, this is why we take those deep dives into the analytics. The Lions' offense has been so inefficient. Jared Goff has the lowest average completions, and DeAndre Swift is the worst yards per carry of any starter in the NFL. I mean, that has to play a key role when you start looking at some of those next-gen stats.
Absolutely. And again, sometimes when I look at the analytics, I do 2 charts every week: yards per play, points per play. Sometimes they don't match up, Steve. Sometimes teams are positive net yards per play. Philly's a great example of this. and negative in net points per play. The translation is you're moving it really well. You're stopping other teams from moving it. But sometimes fluky things get in the way of you scoring. Injuries, penalties, turnovers. They don't, the yards don't always tell the story, but when the yards and the points both align, and in the case of the Lions, they do, they're a bad team.
And that's how the story goes for that team this year. All right, the Cardinals. The Cardinals are the only undefeated team in the NFL, but they're getting 2.5 points in Cleveland. I mean, is this is a Browns team that gave up 47 points last week, and they're facing another explosive offense, and they're giving them 2.5?
I mean, and you're even seeing 3 at some shops. In fact, I saw 3.5 pop up today. And again, I think there's 2 ways to look at this game. If you just take the eye test and you say Arizona's look great, Cleveland's looked okay, but not overly great, then you're obviously going to take the points with Arizona. But that's where the NFL markets zig when you should be zagging. You know how I love to be a contrarian. You know how I love to see things that maybe the average bettor doesn't see, because that's the difference in the NFL markets. It's the center, Rodney Hudson, for the Cardinals. He is out with an injury this week. The second that was announced, I saw this line jump a 0.5 point. I know offensive linemen don't factor into the point spread a whole lot. If there was one position on the offensive line that matters a 0.5 point, it's the center. And I think once they move this line back to 3 and the Sharps didn't immediately gobble it back up to 2.5 and take the +3 with Arizona, that told me the operators are giving us a clear sell sign here with Arizona. They're not going to go 17-0. They are going to lose at some point. And I think this is the week to come off of it, because everybody's going to be saying, hey, Arizona +3, that's easy. They've looked so great. They haven't lost. Not so fast, my friend. The NFL has a funny way of humbling you. And this line is telling me sell Arizona. Sell high on Arizona this week, because the books are basically telling you Cleveland's going to win this game.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, too, is as you look at the numbers, it doesn't necessarily support your narrative here, because the Browns have beaten some average offenses, but against the Chiefs and the Chargers, 2 of the elite offenses, they're giving up big points. So when you see that trend happening during the regular season, how does that shift the narrative of the story that you tell yourself when you're trying to put this game together?
It makes me want to look deeper into a game than I normally would. Usually, when you look too deep into a game, Steve, analysis paralysis. Like, it's just, there's so much information. You can make a case for any side when you look really, really deep and you examine every statistic with a fine-tooth comb. But when I took it a layer deeper in the inception world of the NFL gambling space that we live in, I did think the Rodney Hudson injury was very significant, because you're also missing Chandler Jones with COVID. You're also missing Max Williams with a knee injury. So when you start to pile up the injuries, we did it with Denver a couple weeks ago when we faded the Broncos against the Ravens. The statistics might tell you one thing, but the injury narrative, the players that were on the field while those statistics are being generated, it's not apples to apples. With Arizona, I think you're going to see a drop-off in their running game efficiency this week, because they're without their anchor in the middle of that offensive line.
I love that, because that points you to that sometimes, while we are very statistically based, that sometimes you have to, I guess, understand where those statistics were born and how they'll play out. Yeah, exactly. You have to have a little context to how those statistics came about. All right. Speaking of stats, the Patriots are getting 4.5 as home dog against the Cowboys. We wanted to talk Cowboys because you have picked against the Cowboys more than a few times this year, Jared. Yet, they are the only team to cover each week. Will you keep betting against the trend?
What's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I have faded the Cowboys 2 straight weeks. The Sharps have been fading the Cowboys all season. The Sharps have been wrong all season. The Cowboys have not. They're the only unbeaten team left against the number. And it's also the most consecutive victories against the spread to start a season in Cowboys franchise history. They have never started 5-0 against the number. So very interesting trends. All of the narratives obviously support Dallas. New England's looked okay at times, but also really bad at times. They've gotten blown out in a couple games this year, and they started really slow against Houston. While on the other side, I mean, goodness gracious, Dallas has been running the table and has looked really good. They even give the Bucs a run for their money in week 1 before we really knew what Dallas was. Now I have a pretty good idea of what Dallas is. But the market has moved in their favor, and it's moved considerably. Look ahead line -1, now to 4.5. That's a big move. What did we see last week? What warrants a 3.5-point move in the look-ahead markets? Well, Dallas beat the Giants by 3 scores, but the Giants had nobody left on the field, basically, at the end of that game. And on the other side, the Patriots, again, I know that they didn't look great in the first half, but Mac Jones, his first ever fourth-quarter comeback on the road, a little confidence, and the Patriots are getting back the entire left side of their offensive line this week that missed last week with COVID. Dallas looks a little banged up. Trayvon Diggs didn't practice this week. We all know how good he's looked in the secondary this year. Also, Ezekiel Elliott dealing with a rib injury. So I think the injuries favor the Patriots. I think the line value favors the Patriots. It's not going to be a popular pick because the Cowboys haven't lost against the number, but I got to fade him again this week. I'm thinking this is the week they finally lose against the spread. The market never loses in the NFL, Steve. The market always catches up with you. The odds makers are really smart. They're good at their job.
Hey, listen, if red hits in roulette like 5 straight times, you're expecting that it's going to hit black every now and again.
Right.
If I do want to push back a little bit here, Dallas actually averages 10 points. They actually cover by an average of 10 points per game. So is Vegas ever going to really take notice, or are the lines only going to move when the money starts flowing in that direction?
I'll say this. If they win by a touchdown plus this week, they will continue to be aggressive in moving the Cowboys. Every bookmaker we talked to this week, it's all Cowboys money. This will be the biggest result of the weekend for the sports books. They need New England badly in this game. You saw a little bit of buyback from 4.5, now down to 4. I'm seeing some 3.5s. I think that's because of the Trayvon Diggs, Ezekiel Elliott injury news. If I had to guess, this line probably, you put a pin in 4 this week. That's probably where it'll close. I think they moved it a little too much. We're going to find out how good the odds makers are at their job this week. If the Cowboys win by a field goal, you know they're doing their job right, because you go from 1 to 4, and then boom, the final number lands right in the middle. I would not be shocked. Cowboys by 3. To me, that would be a very reasonable prediction for Sunday.
All right, let's get to the Seahawks, because that line has moved dramatically. They've gone from -2.5 in Pittsburgh to 5-point dogs. Is the fact that Russell Wilson is going to be placed by Geno Smith worth 7.5 points?
That's the question you have to ask yourself. So the way that I've been taught, and again, I think, this is not gospel. This changes year to year, season to season, based off of the overall trends in the NFL. Quarterback's worth about 3 to 4 points on the line. Average quarterback, a middle tier quarterback, worth about a field goal. Patrick Mahomes type quarterback, probably worth 3 in the hook or 4 points. Not 7.5, that's for sure. I don't care if it's Johnny Unitas back there. It ain't 7.5 points on the line. I know Geno Smith has left sour taste in the mouth of a lot of New York sports fans watching this video.
Both Jets and Giants fans. Yeah.
Jets and Giants. He doesn't discriminate. Both Jets and Giants fans probably don't love Geno Smith. But here's what I'll tell you. He's an 8-year veteran. He's been now with the Seahawks. This is his 2nd season. He's been in the NFC West for 3 years. He spent the year out in L.A. I think this is a spot for him to just drive the ship. He doesn't necessarily have to win the game. Just don't lose the game. Because on the other side, the Steelers' defense has been, I would say, average, if maybe slightly below average. DVOA, they're 19th. Overall, 24th against the pass. Last time I checked, the Seahawks still have 2 all-star caliber wide receivers on their team. Now, Seattle's defense has been really poor. I cannot make any excuses for the strength of the Seattle defense this year, which has not been good. But is Big Ben without Juju going to be able to exploit those mismatches that Seattle is exposed to in the secondary and up front? I would lean no. And again, look ahead line. The market has overcorrected in this spot from -2.5 Seattle last week to now +5. I will take 5 points and hope this game stays close. Geno, please don't let me down, because I don't know if I can back you again after this week if you do.
And maybe you're right, man. Maybe it's not nearly as much about Geno as it is about Big Ben, who's earning a new nickname. Yeah. It's Big Ben, B-E-E. And as far as Ben done, Ben should have been out of the league last year. That's how Big Ben has been playing recently. But as you say, man, Seattle's defense hasn't exactly been stellar, because Jamal Adams doesn't have any dogs with him. That's how he sees the top plays of the week. Make sure you check out the other segment on the Giants game and the teaser of the week. For Jared Smith of Pickswise, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.